Meet our nerd MC, Juyun. He has the ability to download or copy any ability from YouTube. Using this ability in the middle of the fight, he instantly becomes a pro mixed martial artist. But when he is facing an enemy far superior to himself, guys, he literally summons David Goggins to motivate him. And that was the intro. Help us get 1,000 likes on this video, and let's begin. Our protagonist, a school student, carries a bag much heavier than anyone else's, though it's not someone else's bag. His bag weighs 32 kilograms, leaving him drenched in sweat and out of breath every day. Two students notice Juyun struggling and tease him, asking if he's carrying military equipment to school. Completely exhausted, Juyun pauses to catch his breath, his face dripping with sweat. One of the boys, a muscular student, offers to help carry Juyun's bag. Despite being tired, Juyun shakes his head and assures them that he doesn't need help. The two boys don't take no for an answer. While one holds Juyun back, the other grabs for the bag. The uglier student yanks Juyun's hair tightly, sneering that they'll return his bag soon enough. The moment the bag is removed from his body, Juyun's vision is overwhelmed by a barrage of strange, chaotic screens. Since a childhood accident, Juyun has been cursed with the ability to see internet data as if it were unfolding before him, filling his mind with unwanted noise. The flood of information makes Juyun's head pound, his stomach churn, and he feels like he's going to pass out. Just as he's about to collapse, the muscular student, unable to handle the bag's weight, tosses it back at Juyun. Clutching the bag once more, Juyun breathes a sigh of relief, his head clearing instantly. The bag contains a signal blocking device that prevents the constant influx of internet data, allowing Juyun to function normally. At school, Juyun is resting his head on his desk with the bag placed securely beside him. With his headphones on, he scrolls through his playlist, trying to relax. A cheerful girl named Jisoo approaches Juyun, waving at him enthusiastically. Jisoo offers him a snack, thanking him for his earlier feedback and mentioning that she updated her thumbnail text based on his suggestion. Proudly, she shows Juyun her YouTube channel, claiming her views have skyrocketed, unaware her phone isn't connected to Wi-Fi. Realizing this, she checks her phone and frowns in disappointment, muttering that the Wi-Fi was working just moments ago. Juyun knows his backpack is the culprit, silently blocking the signal nearby. As Jisoo continues scrolling through her phone, she compliments Juyun on his sense of style, noting that he's always glued to YouTube. Embarrassed, Juyun admits he spends a lot of time watching videos on YouTube. Jisoo tells him to join the broadcasting club if he's interested and walks away with a smile. Watching her leave, Juyun smiles but still feels utterly drained. Romance feels impossible to Juyun since he's disconnected from everything, including the internet. The only place he feels comfortable is at his part-time job with the excavator. At work, the loud noise from demolition blocks the flow of internet data, making the bag unnecessary. Juyun feels normal while operating heavy machinery, finding solace in the job despite the chaos around him. Two construction workers watch in awe, one calling Juyun a prodigy and wishing they could hire him full-time if he weren't in school. Their idle chatter is cut short by the captain, who scolds them to stop slacking and get back to work. Taking a sip from his drink, the captain admits that Juyun is incredibly talented for his age. Juyun works this job not only for the high hourly wage but also to test his unique ability. His ability doesn't just let him see and hear internet data, it allows him to use it under certain conditions. In simple terms, it's like watching a YouTube video and downloading its instructions directly into his mind. By focusing on a video, Juyun can replicate the skills shown in it, though currently, it's limited to operating excavators. After a long day of work, Juyun receives his paycheck in an envelope and thanks his captain. The captain casually asks Juyun how he's doing at school. Nervously, Juyun admits he's considering dropping out soon. Surprised, the captain asks why, and Juyun explains that he feels useful while operating machinery but useless at school. The captain advises him not to rush into decisions, emphasizing the importance of school life. Sighing, Juyun reluctantly agrees to think it over. Suddenly, the smell of smoke fills the air, and the captain notices a nearby building is on fire. Blowing his whistle, he shouts for the workers to call the fire department and grab extinguishers from the office. Staring at the flames, Juyun wonders why the demolition site has caught fire and is relieved that no one should be inside. However, his relief turns to horror when he realizes someone is trapped in the burning building. Panicked, Juyun rushes to the captain, demanding the key to the excavator. The captain, shocked, asks who's inside, but Juyun is already moving with the key in hand. A desperate cry for help echoes from a window, confirming someone's presence. Within moments, the site is swarmed with bystanders and rescue workers, all watching the scene unfold. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon climbs into the excavator and powers it up, ready to act. He drives the excavator toward the building, positioning it beneath the trapped person. Ju-yeon quickly downloads excavator information from the internet into his mind, preparing for the rescue. The shovel attached to the excavator is misaligned, so Ju-yeon begins adjusting it to face the correct direction. The captain watches in shock, unable to believe Ju-yeon is fixing the shovel in such a dangerous situation. Once the shovel is properly aligned, Ju-yeon steps out of the excavator, climbs into the shovel, and instructs the captain to lift it. Standing steady inside the shovel, Ju-yeon rises as the captain lifts it, revealing a woman trapped inside the building. The woman clutches a baby in her arms and tearfully thanks Ju-yeon for coming to save them. As Ju-yeon gets a closer look at the mother and child, he's struck by PTSD, recalling his childhood accident. His mother, trapped in their car, had begged him to run and live while he cried, pleading for her to escape. A man had pulled young Ju-yeon away just seconds before the car exploded into flames. Helpless, Ju-yeon had been forced to watch the tragedy unfold. Now, seeing the mother cry for her baby, Ju-yeon feels his emotions spike, and his head pounds with unbearable pain. Suddenly, the excavator begins to shake violently, almost throwing Ju-yeon off balance. The captain, operating the excavator, looks confused as he tries to figure out why it's shaking. Despite the pain and chaos, Ju-yeon focuses, determined not to let anyone die in front of him again. Clutching his head tightly, he instructs the mother to stay put. As the baby's cries grow louder, Ju-yeon leaps off the excavator's shovel and dives toward the window. Seeing this reckless act, the captain shouts at him, warning it's too dangerous. A burst of flames shoots out from the window as Ju-yeon enters the building. The crowd below gasps in shock, their faces filled with fear and disbelief. Moments later, the mother jumps from the window and lands safely in the excavator's shovel. Once secure, she looks back anxiously, searching for her child. Thankfully, Ju-yeon appears at the window, holding the crying baby, and hands the child to its mother. The mother embraces her baby tightly, her relief palpable. With the mother and child safe, Ju-yeon climbs onto the window's ledge, preparing to jump out. The captain yells at him to jump quickly. Ju-yeon smiles, proud of his heroic effort to save lives. Suddenly, a massive explosion of flames erupts, hurling Ju-yeon out of the window. Ju-yeon begins falling rapidly toward the ground. Desperately, he reaches out and grabs the edge of the windowsill, stopping his fall momentarily. Using all his strength, Ju-yeon clings to the sill, but the concrete he's holding suddenly cracks and crumbles. As the rubble collapses, Ju-yeon plummets to the ground along with the debris. Like a bird without wings, Ju-yeon begins to plummet, with nothing to grab or hold onto. He did everything he could, yet he doesn't understand why he's facing this cruel fate. All he ever wanted was a normal life, and now he's moments away from his end. The fall feels endless, but instead of hitting the ground, Ju-yeon finds himself floating in a vast, dark, empty space. Unsure if he's dead, Ju-yeon is suddenly blinded by a bright light that floods his vision. A massive screen materializes in front of him, and like a video, it begins to broadcast moments from Ju-yeon's life. Puzzled and frustrated, Ju-yeon watches the screen and shouts, demanding to know what's going on. A voice responds, startling Ju-yeon as he realizes the system is talking to him. A strange creature appears on the screen, mocking Ju-yeon and calling him dull-witted. Annoyed, Ju-yeon glares at the system and demands it stop wasting his time and get to the point. Suddenly, a gigantic projection of a brain materializes in front of him. A sharp pain stabs through Ju-yeon's head, and he grabs it with both hands, struggling to stay upright. As the pain intensifies, Ju-yeon collapses to his knees, feeling like his mind might shatter at any moment. The brain berates him for not using his abilities to their full potential, while Ju-yeon curses it for causing him such unbearable pain. The brain announces it will share its strength with him and introduces itself as Stream, the last seed of Yggdrasil. Just as a lightning bolt strikes Ju-yeon, everything goes black, and Ju-yeon loses consciousness, later found by rescuers under the rubble. After the bizarre experience, Ju-yeon wakes up alive, and the doctors send him home, unable to find any injuries or damage. Still shaken, Ju-yeon can't figure out what he went through or if it was real. However, a bigger problem looms as Ju-yeon discovers his ability has changed and become even stranger. While still forced to carry the heavy signal-blocking device, he realizes he can now see videos, not just hear data or voices. When Ju-yeon first regained consciousness in the hospital, he noticed strange floating screens hovering around everyone. A video of a heavy metal concert floated beside the nurse, an idol video hovered near a doctor, and a terrifying beasts video appeared next to a woman. Shaking his head in disbelief, Ju-yeon assumed these must be the people's favorite NewTube videos. Now, Ju-yeon arrives at his classroom, places his bag next to his desk, and takes deep breaths. Exhausted, sitting down, he lowers his head onto the desk, feeling completely uninterested in learning anything. The teacher walks into the room and instructs the students to take their seats. He then announces that a new student has transferred to their class. The teacher introduces the student, a girl named Min Seoa, and asks her to enter the room. A dude sitting in front of Juyeon exclaims that Min Seoa is beautiful, clearly impressed by the new student. Meanwhile, Juyeon notices a floating video player around Min Seoa, but this one displays an access denied message. Min Seoa glances directly at Juyeon, leaving him nervous and even more confused about what is happening. Everyone watches NoTube. Some people watch training videos at home to learn yoga and other exercises. Others use NoTube to access educational videos for their college and school courses. Some people enjoy watching their favorite streamers live on NoTube. But Juyeon is different. He can now automatically see everyone's NoTube videos, seemingly floating around them. However, Juyeon isn't particularly interested in learning these details about others. The class president, who is solely focused on studies, seems to love watching dance videos. A friend Juyeon isn't close with turns out to be a kendo fanatic, and a heavy-set student who never exercises surprisingly enjoys workout videos. Just like this, Juyeon can see everyone's favorite NoTube videos, except for one person. Min Seoa, the new transfer student, has her NoTube videos completely locked, and access to them is denied. The teacher instructs Min Seoa to introduce herself to the class, but instead of introducing herself, Min Seoa casually says she feels uncomfortable. The entire class is stunned upon hearing this. Even the teacher is shocked and asks Min Seoa what she means by that. Min Seoa forces a smile and clarifies that she didn't mean it in a negative way. She then points to her school uniform, claiming that it's stiff and uncomfortable to move in, which leaves the boys flustered. Only Juyeon gets a strange, ominous feeling from Min Seoa. He doesn't understand why only Min Seoa's NoTube videos are showing error windows, while everyone else's are fine. As Juyeon continues to watch Min Seoa, she suddenly stares back at him, her eyes momentarily blank with an eerie expression. Juyeon is taken aback by the unsettling look. The guy sitting in front of Juyeon assumes Min Seoa is looking at him and smiles hopefully, thinking she might like him. After an hour, the class ends, and while the other students head out for their break, Juyeon stays at his desk, his head resting on it. He glances over at Min Seoa, who is surrounded by other curious girls, all eagerly questioning her. One girl touches Min Seoa's hair, commenting on how pretty it is. Min Seoa immediately slaps the girl's hand away, saying she doesn't feel comfortable. She warns the girls to stay away from her, mentioning that she's a bit sensitive. Right then, she notices Juyeon and points at him, asking who he is. Yoon Jisoo exclaims that Min Seoa is beautiful and suggests to Juyeon that they should try to recruit her for the broadcasting club. Getting up at this suggestion, Juyeon comments that Min Seoa seems a bit strange, but Yoon Jisoo insists that Min Seoa isn't strange, she's just pretty. The girls, when asked about Juyeon, tell Min Seoa not to pay him any attention and to give up on him. They warn her that Juyeon is a total loner, always carrying a large bag around like a weirdo. Upon hearing about the bag, Min Seoa shows sudden interest. Meanwhile, Yoon Jisoo pulls out her phone and shows Juyeon a video of him saving a woman and her child from a fire. Yoon Jisoo points out that the student in the video looks exactly like Juyeon. Juyeon stares at the video in shock, wondering if Mr. Kim recorded it. He quickly dismisses the thought, convincing Yoon Jisoo that the student in the video isn't him. Nervously, Juyeon starts sweating as Min Seoa suddenly appears behind him and asks if he's the one in the video. Startled by her sudden appearance, Juyeon spins around, alarmed. Min Seoa asks why he looks so surprised. She points to a strand of hair on his shoulder and removes it, all while studying him closely. Then, she leans in closer to him and asks if he thought he could hide everything forever. With a creepy smile, Min Seoa tells Juyeon to quietly follow her. Juyeon is now terrified beyond belief, his face contorted in fear and drenched in sweat. As Min Seoa leaves the classroom carrying Juyeon's bag, he instantly feels a sharp pain in his head as a rush of internet data floods his mind. In shock, Juyeon notices that his bag is missing. Min Seoa has taken it. Seeing Juyeon twitching, Yoon Jisoo asks if he's alright. Juyeon tells her he'll be back and quickly leaves the classroom, his head still ringing and his vision blurry without the bag. Struggling to walk down the hallway, everything around him seems distorted, floating as if he's in a daze. He reaches the computer room and enters to find Min Seoa already inside, with his bag placed on the windowsill. Panting heavily, Juyeon demands to know why she took his bag. Min Seoa casually places a hand on the bag, telling him he'll have to carry something much heavier from now on, before pushing it out the window. Ju-yeon watches in horror, unable to do anything but shout as his bag plummets to the ground. Suddenly, Ju-yeon feels every ounce of internet information flooding into his body, causing his veins to throb painfully. Two guys are playing basketball on the playground when Ju-yeon's bag crashes nearby, grabbing their attention. The device inside the bag is instantly destroyed. Shocked, the two guys look up at the building from where the bag fell. Meanwhile, back in the computer lab, Min Seo identifies that Ju-yeon has a seed of Yggdrasil in his head. She explains that, according to the owner's desire, the seed reveals all truths the owner seeks as its function. If the owner desires it, the seed becomes a powerful weapon, and if the owner desires knowledge, it grants insight. If the owner desires authority, the seed becomes a crown, and it also grants infinite artistic abilities. However, once the seed fulfills its owner's desires, it devours that host completely. In the past, whenever the seed devoured its host, a catastrophe followed and struck the world. Hearing this, Ju-yeon asks if that's the same seed inside his head. Min Seo tells him not to pretend he doesn't know and claims she can see everything. Leaning closer to Ju-yeon, making him look at her, Min Seo says that normally, he would be classified as a target for elimination. However, she adds, this time the higher-ups have decided to give Ju-yeon a second chance. Completely puzzled by all this, Ju-yeon asks what she means by a chance. Reaching for a CD, Min Seo says that the chance is to see if Ju-yeon is worthy, then snaps the CD in half. Holding the other half like a knife, Min Seo charges at Ju-yeon, as if to stab him. Swinging the sharp piece, she dashes past Ju-yeon, cutting him across the chest. Seeing Ju-yeon fail to dodge, she clicks her tongue in disappointment. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon, who has no idea what's going on, asks Min Seo what the hell she's doing. But Min Seo lunges at him again, making 2 cuts on his arms, causing him to groan in pain. She slides backward, maintaining distance from Ju-yeon. Finding her uniform uncomfortable for attacking, she removes it, revealing workout attire underneath. Seeing Min Seo get serious, Ju-yeon raises a hand, asking her to wait. He points out that although he has strange abilities, none of them are suited for fighting. He reveals that all he's been able to do with his abilities is operate an excavator. Not believing Ju-yeon's words, Min Seo charges at him again, demanding to see his true desire. As she swings the sharp weapon at him, Ju-yeon manages to dodge, leaving himself surprised. But Min Seo swings again, leaving a cut on his shoulder. Trying to defend himself, Ju-yeon wonders if Min Seo is actually trying to kill him. Ready to attack again, Min Seo notes that she only knows how to kill and tells him to do something or risk dying. Wiping blood off his cheek, Ju-yeon wonders what he can do against her. He kind of wants to run away through the open door. As if reading his mind, Min Seo warns him that if he runs and gets caught, he'll be used as a lab rat for the rest of his life. Frustrated, Ju-yeon shouts that he doesn't know what to do, explaining he doesn't need the power of knowledge, just money from his excavator job. He bellows that all he wants is to live normally like everyone else. Smirking at his desire for normalcy, Min Seo makes it clear that it's impossible. She points out that with the power Ju-yeon has, his greed will eventually overtake his emotions. Feeling frustrated, Ju-yeon asks Min Seo what she knows about him and tells her not to make assumptions so easily. He explains that because of his abilities, he's been carrying a 32 kilograms bag to school every day. He further adds that he hasn't made any friends and has been doing the excavator job just to barely make a living. His eyes widen in rage, turning blue as his emotions get the better of him, and the access denied screen next to Min Seo shatters. Sensing her guard being bypassed by Ju-yeon, Min Seo is taken aback. Ju-yeon's rage continues to mount, his eyes glowing brighter as he lets off an evil, scary aura, his fist clenched. Min Seo notes that Ju-yeon is finally showing his true ability and asks what he will do if she doesn't let go of him. Seeing Min Seo's stubbornness, Ju-yeon can't believe it. With her defenses now broken, Ju-yeon can see her favorite videos flickering around him. All these videos are related to combat fighting. Min Seo charges at him once more, but this time, Ju-yeon is prepared and easily counters Min Seo's attack. Swiftly and decisively, Ju-yeon grabs Min Seo's arm, lifting her off the ground and sending her crashing to the floor with ease. Ju-yeon feels a strange sensation, and the next moment, as he opens his eyes, he finds himself floating before a series of videos, all related to combat fighting. He recognizes that the videos are the same ones he saw around Min Seo earlier. Suddenly, the videos start flooding into Ju-yeon's mind as if he's sucking them in like a vacuum cleaner. He feels excruciating pain in his head and grits his teeth, trying to cope with it. The next moment, he finds himself back in reality, engaged in a fight with Min Seoa. Grinning at Juyeon, Min Seoa says that it's nice to see him showing his true self. She raises her hand, grabs Juyeon by his hair, and deadlocks his neck with both of her arms. But Juyeon reacts quickly, pushing her back and sending her flying to the other side of the room. Landing on her knees, Min Seoa acknowledges that Juyeon is strong and claims she was planning to break his neck. Feeling his neck with his hand, Juyeon now understands that Min Seoa is truly serious about killing him. As Min Seoa swings the knife at him, Juyeon decides to focus on her movements. He quickly leaps aside, narrowly avoiding the knife swung at him. Thinking carefully, Juyeon uses his left hand to stop Min Seoa from launching another attack at him. Seeing Juyeon fight so well, Min Seoa is a little taken aback. Blocking more and more attacks, Juyeon realizes he can't keep doing this forever. So, he decides to counterattack, clenching his other fist while blocking with the first. Grabbing Min Seoa by the shoulder, Juyeon pushes her body down while thrusting his knee upward, landing an uppercut to her gut. After this successful attack, Juyeon is surprised at himself for being able to use Krav Maga. Panting from exhaustion, Juyeon asks Min Seoa if she's had enough and suggests they stop now. Her head bowed down, Min Seoa praises Juyeon, saying he's doing better than she thought. Then she grins evilly and says she isn't done yet, charging at Juyeon again. Using a slide tackle, she knocks Juyeon off balance, causing him to begin falling back. Juyeon crashes to the floor with a loud bang. Min Seoa instantly follows up, raising a leg to crush Juyeon's head. Seeing the attack, Juyeon moves his head sideways, making Min Seoa's foot crush the floor instead. Min Seoa leans down and grabs a cable cord. Juyeon requests Min Seoa to stop, claiming he has reached the end of his abilities. Min Seoa states that if Juyeon is giving up so easily, it's better to die right now, as she brands the cord with both hands and lunges at him. Feeling the cord wrapping around his neck, Juyeon suddenly enters a trance. He communicates with his consciousness, trying to figure out what he can do now that he's cornered, recalling the game of chase tag he used to play as a child. Back in reality, Juyeon makes a last-second split decision and propels himself forward like a bullet, avoiding being strangled. Seeing Juyeon run like this, Min Seoa doesn't chase him instantly but notes that if he gets caught again, he will die. Like a flash, Juyeon dashes through the corridor, blowing snacks, food, and clothes from the students there. A little further into the corridor, a guy is carrying a desk out of the classroom when he notices Juyeon. But Juyeon simply slides on the ground, avoiding colliding with the desk and continues running. Right now, Juyeon has nothing on his mind except that he needs to run as fast as he can away from Min Seoa. He hopes he's lost her when Min Seoa suddenly lunges at him from the front. Cursing her, Juyeon tilts his head sideways to avoid being grabbed. Chasing after Juyeon up the stairs, Min Seoa reminds him that if he keeps running, he will live like a lab rat forever. Seeing how fast Min Seoa is, Juyeon realizes he can't shake her off just by running. So, he looks into the system to see if there are any useful videos but finds it empty. At this rate, Juyeon fears he will be caught as he continues running. After a while, he comes across two doors and pushes them open. Once inside, he closes the doors shut and locks them from the inside. Drenched in sweat, he turns around and finds 3 guys in the corner, all smoking. For the first time in his life, Juyeon is pleased to be in front of these bullies, as he apologizes to them with tearful eyes. Seeing Juyeon, the man with brown hair asks him what he's doing there. Juyeon drops to his knees and apologizes to the bullies. The blonde bully, noticing Juyeon staring at them, warns him not to do so if he doesn't want to die. Suddenly, Min Seoa kicks the door open with a powerful swing of her leg, startling Juyeon. Ruffling her hair, Min Seoa steps inside, and the blonde bully, captivated by her, approaches her. Before he can react, Min Seoa delivers a quick kick to his chin, sending him crashing to the floor, unconscious. Juyeon and the 2 remaining bullies are stunned by the sudden attack. The leader of the bullies, fuming with anger, charges at Min Seoa along with the other bully, determined to avenge their fallen friend. But they are no match for Min Seoa, who easily punches both of them, sending them flying sideways. Turning to face Juyeon, Min Seoa reminds him that she told him not to run away. She asks if he truly thought these bullies would save him from her. Juyeon lies, claiming he never expected them to, adding that he just wanted to buy some time. He then says that he's just realized something, prompting Min Seoa to ask what it is. His eyes glowing, Juyeon declares that after being chased by her, he remembered how much he wants to live. Desperately searching for more combat-related videos, Juyeon begins downloading them into his mind, but the overwhelming flood of information causes veins to bulge on his face. The intense pain overwhelms him, and Ju-yeon falls to his knees, scratching his head in frustration. Seeing his condition, Min Seo assures him that she will end his misery quickly. She declares that it's the end for him and charges at Ju-yeon, ready to finish him off. However, she stops and quickly raises her arms to block Ju-yeon's kick aimed at her face. The force of the kick pushes Min Seo slightly back. Without hesitation, Ju-yeon launches another attack, but Min Seo dodges it effortlessly. He continues attacking with relentless punches, but Min Seo evades each one. He throws a final punch, but Min Seo deflects it with a swift motion, redirecting it with a smack of her hand. Taking advantage of the opening, Min Seo grabs Ju-yeon by the neck. Lifting him off his feet, she choke slams him to the floor with a loud crash. Looking down at Ju-yeon, Min Seo taunts him, asking if that's all he's got. She raises her foot above his face and states that he's too weak to be of any use as a vessel. As she begins choking him with her leg, Ju-yeon gasps for breath and asks her what she wants from him. Min Seo demands that Ju-yeon spit out the seed of Yggdrasil inside him. Desperate and on the brink of death, Ju-yeon's raging emotions begin to take over his body. Meanwhile, down on the lower floors, the students notice a sudden darkness in the classroom as a power outage occurs. Yoon Jisoo scowls, seeing that her smartphone has suddenly stopped working. Back on the rooftop, Ju-yeon is still being choked by Min Seo's foot pressing against his neck. But this time, Ju-yeon is no longer the same. He has been overtaken by the seed of Yggdrasil. Lifting his leg, the seed of Yggdrasil kicks Min Seo in the gut, sending her flying off her feet. The power of the kick sends Min Seo sliding a few feet backward. She realizes that Ju-yeon might have broken the vessel, noting the eerie smile on his face. Pointing his finger at Min Seo, the seed of Yggdrasil causes a transformer in the power line behind her to explode. Smoke and fire erupt into the sky as the explosion intensifies. With the same creepy smile on his face, the seed of Yggdrasil comments that he's curious who is trying to kill his meat shield, referring to Ju-yeon. Clenching her fists, ready to fight, Min Seo dares the seed of Yggdrasil to come at her. In an instant, the seed of Yggdrasil disappears from sight and reappears right before Min Seo. Raising one hand, he pulls back a finger as if holding a catapult and points it at Min Seo's face. Releasing the finger, the seed of Yggdrasil generates such force that it sends Min Seo flying backward. Min Seo crashes to the ground a few feet away, but she quickly stands up. Observing her still standing, the seed of Yggdrasil notes that she's no ordinary girl to withstand his attack. Excited to engage her further, the seed of Yggdrasil declares he will now use kicks and tells Min Seo to block well. He propels himself toward Min Seo, who raises her arms to shield herself. The force of the kick is so powerful that the shockwave sends the goal post from the rooftop crashing to the ground below. Standing at the edge of the roof, the seed of Yggdrasil looks down at the destruction he has caused. A creepy grin spreads across his face as he watches Min Seo hanging from the side, holding on with just 4 fingers. The seed of Yggdrasil lifts his foot, ready to kick Min Seo off the building and finish her off. But just before he can strike, the seed of Yggdrasil suddenly halts his leg mid-air as the real Ju-yeon regains consciousness, fighting to take control of his body back. Ju-yeon reminds the seed of Yggdrasil that he had promised to do anything asked of him, and the seed of Yggdrasil asks what Ju-yeon wants. In a desperate move, Ju-yeon punches himself in the face with full force, shouting at the seed of Yggdrasil to get out of his head right now. Moments ago, when Ju-yeon was overwhelmed by heavy emotions, his body became vulnerable to being possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil. The true consciousness of Ju-yeon finds himself floating in an empty, dark space. He recognizes this place as the same one he visited last time, when he was nearly crushed under the building. Looking around, Ju-yeon wonders where the seed of Yggdrasil is hiding. Suddenly, he notices something on a screen. Getting startled, the figure on the screen is Ju-yeon's own body, but possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil, who waves at him with a creepy smile. Realizing that his body is being controlled, Ju-yeon curses angrily, demanding his body back. The seed of Yggdrasil confidently tells Ju-yeon to watch closely and see the true strength of his body. Unintimidated, Ju-yeon shouts at the seed of Yggdrasil to let him out immediately. The seed of Yggdrasil simply mocks him, daring Ju-yeon to try and escape on his own. Grinning like it's all a joke, the seed of Yggdrasil gives a thumbs up and teases Ju-yeon. Realizing he can't do anything but watch, Ju-yeon falls silent. Overcome with frustration, Ju-yeon recalls how he used to carry the heavy bag every day, sitting alone in the classroom with no friends. But having his body taken over by someone else is crossing the line, and Ju-yeon is filled with rage. Clenching his fists, he thrusts them forward with all his might, trying to punch the screen before him. He repeats the action, landing several blows on the screen. However, his punches are futile. They don't damage the screen, and he collapses, drenched in sweat. Just then, another screen appears before him, startling him. Following the first, more screens appear, each showing online videos, and Ju-yeon realizes he can use his abilities here after all. This realization fills him with a glimmer of hope. Determined to escape this nightmare, Ju-yeon decides to do whatever it takes to break free. A larger screen appears with a video of punches, reminding Ju-yeon how he had poured all his strength into his punches against Min Seo-a. Back then, the punches weren't effective, but now he thinks he might be able to make them work. Clenching his fists, veins bulging in his arms, Ju-yeon releases a powerful, deathly aura. He turns to face the screen and declares that he will try everything he can. Charging up a punch, he puts all his strength into it and thrusts it forward, demanding his body back. His punch strikes the screen with such force that it creates a hole in it. The entire screen shatters into countless pieces. Meanwhile, Min Seo-a, who is hanging off the edge of the rooftop, pulls herself up and lands back on solid ground. She notices Ju-yeon standing nearby, his back turned to her. Leaning down, she picks up a wire cord, contemplating killing Ju-yeon. Suddenly, Ju-yeon starts yelling loudly, demanding the seed of Yggdrasil get out of his head. Min Seo-a is shocked, as she knows the seed of Yggdrasil never allows a host to regain their sanity once it takes control. But judging by Ju-yeon's actions, it seems like he's regained his sanity. Grabbing his arm with her other hand, Ju-yeon curses the seed of Yggdrasil, ordering it to return where it came from. In the next moment, the seed of Yggdrasil takes control of Ju-yeon's body again and, with the same creepy grin, tells Ju-yeon to accept him. But Ju-yeon quickly forces the seed of Yggdrasil out again and regains control of his body, slapping his face. While Ju-yeon is distracted, Min Seo-a moves in and wraps the wire cord around his neck from behind. She declares that Ju-yeon has failed, and now he will die. However, Ju-yeon tells Min Seo-a to wait and assures her that he has regained control of his senses. Rethinking her decision, Min Seo-a reluctantly releases the wire, cursing under her breath. She pulls out her earpiece and speaks into it, ordering the Alpha team to proceed. Following her command, masked soldiers armed with guns arrive and aim them at Ju-yeon. Ju-yeon is puzzled, unsure of what is happening. A soldier asks if they should kill Ju-yeon, prompting Ju-yeon to shout that he won't let anyone kill him. With a sigh, Min Seo-a declares that they will take Ju-yeon alive to the Scallops headquarters. Repeated warnings echo through the system as a man in a lab coat anxiously tries to assess the situation. The man looks stressed, unsure of the unknown error that has occurred. The alarm blares loudly behind him, causing the man to spin around in alarm. The system announces an emergency as computers short-circuit, catching fire and filling the facility with smoke. After a tense moment, 2 employees in safety gear manage to extinguish the fire. The conclusion of the incident is clear. The target is inside Ju-yeon's head. One of the men asks if they are dealing with a monster, but Ju-yeon, still tied to a chair, responds that he is a high school student, not a monster. The 2 men remain silent, unsure how to react to Ju-yeon's words. Meanwhile, in the main control room, a researcher approaches the director, holding a stack of important documents. The researcher examines the report and informs the director that they've detected dislikes in Ju-yeon's brain. At this moment, in a different room, a man is watching Ju-yeon through a screen and turns to Min Seo-a, telling her that she's caught a big fish. The man is Min Da-hoon, the director of Scallops headquarters. Rising from his seat, Min Da-hoon asks Min Seo-a why she didn't report Ju-yeon sooner. After a moment of thought, Min Seo-a replies that she saw finding Ju-yeon as her own little secret, like a cafe she wanted to keep to herself. Min Da-hoon, unsure whether Min Seo-a is serious or joking, decides to set the discussion aside and asks her to bring something out. Min Seo-a removes her lenses and hands them to Min Da-hoon. Min Da-hoon attaches the lenses to a VR set and puts it on his head. However, upon seeing what the lenses reveal, his face contorts in horror, and he quickly removes the VR headset. He points out that it does have the feel of a cafe you'd want to keep to yourself. Sighing, Min Seo-a mentions that while the coffee was good, the owner just wasn't it. Min Da-hoon asks her what kind of owner she means. Min Seo-a admits she's not entirely sure, adding that the other owner who comes out sometimes is someone she never wants to meet again. Min Da-hoon asks if she's giving up, and Min Seo-a explains that she's not good at tolerating things that make her uncomfortable. Raising a finger, Min Da-hoon asks what they will do about the seed. Min Seo-a explains that the seed grows by consuming desire, and since Ju-yeon has no such desires, she thinks it might disappear over time if left alone. She also suggests they can simply transplant it if it turns out to be dangerous. Min Da-hoon asks if Min Seo-a knows the difference between a hero and a villain, explaining that education is the key factor that sets them apart. He adds that no tube can be violent and proactive, but if properly nurtured, it has endless potential. Min Seo-a is surprised to hear this from Min Da-hoon. Meanwhile, Juyeon is being escorted by two researchers. Juyeon asks where he's being taken and if it's for them to remove his brain or something. The researcher with parted hair snaps at Juyeon to be quiet, reminding him of how many machines he broke today. After a while, they arrive outside a guarded area, and the researcher shows the guard a card, stating they're there by the director's orders. The door slides open, and the researcher tells Juyeon to go inside. Upon entering, Juyeon faces Min Seoa and Min Daehoon. Seeing Min Seoa, a muscle twitches in Juyeon's face as he remembers everything happening to him is because of her. Noticing Juyeon glaring at Min Seoa, Min Daehoon tells him not to stare at her. Extending his arm to shake, he introduces himself. Seeing that Juyeon's hands are tied, Min Daehoon laughs and says he'll free Juyeon right now. As he removes the bindings, Min Daehoon apologizes, explaining they were simply following procedure. Once Juyeon's hands are freed, Min Daehoon asks him to take a seat. With Juyeon seated, Min Daehoon takes his own seat, clears his throat, and suggests they start the interview. The first question is about Juyeon's father's details, but Juyeon doesn't respond. Seeing Juyeon silent, Min Daehoon says it doesn't matter and claims he has the gun of truth. Making a gun gesture with his fingers, Min Daehoon says it might sting a little as he points his fingers at Juyeon. Then he shoots an energy force field that hits Juyeon in the face, sending him flying backward. After firing at Juyeon, Min Daehoon explains that what he shot was the bullet of truth. He points his fingers at Juyeon once again, energy crackling around them, and assures him that it won't hurt. Claiming he will only unlock Juyeon's memories, Min Daehoon releases an electric charge aimed directly at him. However, the shockwave from the attack unexpectedly backfires, pushing Min Daehoon backward. Clutching his trembling hand with the other, Min Daehoon looks confused, unsure of what just happened. Meanwhile, Juyeon finds himself standing on his feet, completely disoriented. Turning around, he notices his real body slumped against the wall, seemingly unconscious. Juyeon suddenly realizes that his consciousness has been separated from his body, and an invisible force presses down on him. His feet sink into a strange liquid, and as he passes through it, he finds himself falling through an open sky. He continues to descend, with the vast expanse of the clear blue ocean stretching out below him. With a loud splash, Juyeon plunges into the icy sea water, slowly sinking toward the seabed. Desperately, he raises his hand, struggling to break free from the dimly lit surface above. Moments later, he finally manages to push his head out of the water, coughing violently and expelling large amounts of seawater. Spotting a tube floating nearby, he grabs onto it, gasping for air and panting heavily. Something to his left catches his attention, and as he turns his head, he sees a large play button-like object glowing and rising into the sky like a sun. All of this is happening to Juyeon's consciousness, while his real body remains slumped in the lab, unconscious. Min Daehoon's fingers are severely burned from the shot he fired at Juyeon. Min Seoa helps him stand, noticing how drained he looks after using such a terrifying technique. Min Daehoon mentions that his technique borrowed 10% of South Korea's total power supply. This power surge has caused blackouts, leaving several cities in darkness. People resort to using their phones for light as authorities issue instructions for everyone to return home immediately. Some people, however, appear visibly annoyed by the sudden power outage. Back at the lab, Min Seoa questions Min Daehoon, asking if using the technique was truly worth it. Min Daehoon replies that everything now depends on Juyeon himself. Meanwhile, Juyeon stares at the glowing play button, recognizing its resemblance to NoTube's logo. Memories of his recent struggles flood his mind, and an intense rage consumes him as he blames the seed of Yggdrasil for everything. The tube vanishes, and Juyeon finds himself floating on his back in the water, strangely feeling at ease. Nearby, a massive wave begins forming, but with his eyes closed, Juyeon remains unaware, simply enjoying the calmness. The wave grows higher and higher, towering tens of feet above Juyeon. Like a waterfall, the wave crashes down, plunging Juyeon deep beneath the water's surface. The scene abruptly shifts, and Juyeon suddenly finds himself back in his childhood classroom, standing as a child in front of the class. The teacher instructs Juyeon to share what he did during his vacation with his classmates. Smiling, Juyeon proudly tells the class that he learned how to surf and rode a banana boat. One of his friends questions why Juyeon's skin hasn't tanned at all if he truly went surfing. This comment wipes the smile off Juyeon's face, leaving him visibly nervous. The other children start doubting whether Juyeon really went to the sea, given his pale skin. Hearing their disbelief, Juyeon lowers his head in silence, unable to respond. After school, Juyeon sits in a car heading home as the family driver asks if he had a good day. Distracted by a vlog on his phone, Juyeon mutters that it wasn't fun. The driver asks if something happened, and Juyeon, putting his phone aside, inquires why skin tans when people go to the sea. The driver then asks Ju-yeon if he has ever been to the sea before. Ju-yeon admits that he hasn't, as his parents are always too busy. The driver sighs, lamenting how Ju-yeon's father is irresponsible for not making time for him. He then explains that when people go to the sea, their skin tans, much like how a snake sheds its outer layer of skin. Curious, Ju-yeon asks if tanning is a good thing, to which the driver, with a creepy smile, affirms that it is. Suddenly, the driver turns to face Ju-yeon, revealing himself to be the seed of Yggdrasil, shocking Ju-yeon beyond belief. Suddenly, rain pours down, soaking the area as dark clouds obscure the sky, with the faint outline of the no-tube button visible. Ju-yeon remains submerged, while the tube floats serenely on the surface. Moments earlier, the calm sea had started to sway, and within minutes, a storm overtook the tranquil waters, turning them violently rough. However, just as quickly as it arrived, the storm vanishes, leaving the sea calm. Meanwhile, Min Da-hoon turns on a record player, and the soft melody of a lullaby fills the room. Confused by this, Min Seo questions Min Da-hoon, asking why he's playing music in such a serious situation. Min Da-hoon explains that in times of turmoil, nothing is more soothing than a melodious lullaby. He elaborates that every lullaby carries the same wish, sleep well, grimly adding, the world is hell, while watching Ju-yeon's leg twitch faintly. Min Seo remarks that everyone possessed by the seed of Yggdrasil has caused chaos, speculating that Ju-yeon might do the same. At that moment, a researcher rushes into the room, holding a report and urgently calling out for Min Da-hoon. Min Da-hoon takes the report and schemes through it, discovering from the MRI scan that there is a chip implanted in Ju-yeon's brain. Back in Ju-yeon's memory, the car he is riding in continues driving him home. The seed of Yggdrasil calmly explains to Ju-yeon that going to the beach leads to sunburn, likening it to a snake shedding its skin. Ju-yeon hesitantly asks if that's a good thing, and the seed of Yggdrasil, turning to face him with a menacing grin, affirms that it is. The unsettling expression startles Ju-yeon, making him recoil slightly. The seed of Yggdrasil leaves its seat and walks toward Ju-yeon, extending a hand toward his face. Clasping its hand over Ju-yeon's mouth, the seed of Yggdrasil asks if he remembers that this moment was the beginning of everything. It declares that Ju-yeon will never forget the first day of his 5th grade. The seed of Yggdrasil reveals that it was the very day when Ju-yeon and his mother were involved in a tragic accident. A bus had come out of nowhere and, before Ju-yeon's eyes, collided head-on with their car. The sudden jolt of this memory pulls Ju-yeon back to the sea, sinking ever deeper into the ocean bed. Min Da-hoon had sent Ju-yeon to uncover the truth, but so far, he has only faced his most humiliating and painful memories. The tube continues to float on the peaceful surface of the sea, until suddenly, Ju-yeon bursts out of the water, gasping for air. Grabbing the tube for support, he coughs and sputters, trying to expel the water from his lungs. Shaking his head in frustration, Ju-yeon angrily demands to know where he is and what this strange place is. Suddenly, the seed of Yggdrasil emerges from the water before him, mocking Ju-yeon by asking if all he craves is attention. Floating effortlessly into the air, the seed of Yggdrasil laughs at Ju-yeon, who shouts at it to shut up. The seed of Yggdrasil smirks and continues taunting him, repeating its accusation that Ju-yeon is just an attention seeker. Enraged, Ju-yeon curses the seed of Yggdrasil and demands to know if it invaded his mind during the accident. Hovering high above, the seed of Yggdrasil nonchalantly replies that when it invaded Ju-yeon's mind isn't important. Raising a finger, it adds that the more significant question is why. With a mocking gesture, the seed of Yggdrasil pinches its nose and dives back into the sea, leaving Ju-yeon shouting after it, demanding answers. Slamming his palm into the water in frustration, Ju-yeon growls, still clueless about what truth he's supposed to uncover. Looking up at the no-tube symbol shining brilliantly like the sun, Ju-yeon wonders if the truth is somehow connected to it. Thoughts of the sun, sunburn, and his past shedding away like old skin swirl chaotically in his mind. He struggles to recall the events following the accident and remembers that he didn't wake up for an entire year. Just then, another massive wave crashes down on Ju-yeon, forcing him underwater once more. The reality is that after the accident, Ju-yeon fell into a coma and remained in a brain-dead state for 90 days before being transferred to a research facility. The head doctor sought approval from Ju-yeon's guardians, while the seed of Yggdrasil deceitfully claimed his parents had already consented. With that confirmation, the doctor started the experiment on Ju-yeon. Ju-yeon vividly remembers opening his eyes after the accident, his head throbbing, his his body overwhelmed by nausea and dizziness, yet feeling strangely warm. As soon as he regained consciousness, a group of over-enthusiastic doctors surrounded him, offering cheerful welcomes. That marked the beginning of everything that followed. The doctors bombarded Juyeon with questions, asking if he felt any discomfort and urging him to share any concerns. However, Juyeon remained silent, prompting one of the doctors to suggest they start their process from scratch. They began teaching Juyeon how to walk properly, ensuring his movements appeared natural. They trained him to speak fluently, focusing on eliminating any slurring or unclear pronunciation. Juyeon was even taught how to smile naturally, as though his emotions were being reconstructed from nothing. It felt as if he was being reprogrammed, like a newborn learning the basic aspects of human behavior. One day, while eating lunch, Juyeon glanced at a nearby TV screen and saw a video depicting a skeleton. The video detailed how brain-dead patients could be saved by implanting computer chips in their brains. It dawned on Juyeon that this was precisely what had been done to him. A chip had been implanted in his brain. Back in the present, the researcher, Min Seoa, and Min Da-hoon are all stunned by the discovery of the chip in Juyeon's brain. Min Seoa expresses disbelief, asking how can it be a chip and not a seed of Yggdrasil. The baffled researcher admits he has never seen anything like it before. Min Da-hoon, deep in thought, speculates whether they are mistaken or if those who implant the chip replicate the seed of Yggdrasil's properties. A sudden realization strikes him, and he declares that they need to wake Juyeon immediately. In a hurried tone, he asks if the necessary power supply is ready, to which the researcher confirms it is fully charged. Meanwhile, in Juyeon's memory, he is running on a treadmill as part of his rehabilitation process. After powering off the treadmill, the head doctor suggests that it is time for Juyeon to undertake the final test. Drenched in sweat, Juyeon asks if passing the test means he can leave. The doctor assures him that he can, provided he succeeds in the test. Juyeon eagerly asks if he will be able to see his parents again, and the doctor promises he will. A wide smile of excitement spreads across Juyeon's face as he hears the doctor's words. Patting Juyeon's shoulder, the doctor encourages him to give his best effort during the final test. The doctor leads Juyeon to a room filled with an intricate network of machinery, a place that feels overwhelmingly advanced and alien. Juyeon sits down as researchers place a helmet bristling with wires onto his head. Confused by the setup, Juyeon hesitates before asking what is happening. In front of him stands a massive glass tube, housing what the doctor refers to as a sleeping god. The doctor explains that they are about to awaken this god and, in doing so, ascend to godhood themselves. With a confident gesture, he signals the researchers to begin their plan. Pressing buttons, the doctor asks Juyeon what he plans to do once he wakes up, and Juyeon replies he will go to the sea with his parents. Smiling sinisterly, the doctor assures Juyeon that his wish will indeed come true. With that, he presses a red button, sending a surge of electricity coursing through Juyeon's body. Juyeon screams in agony as the electricity flows through his veins, his body convulsing violently. Although this memory belongs to the past, it begins affecting Juyeon's real body in the present, causing him to twitch uncontrollably. Min Da-hoon, pointing at Juyeon, explains that truth exists in 3 stages, one rooted in experience, another reconstructed by memory, and the last intertwined with lies. Lowering his electricity-charged finger to Juyeon's forehead, Min Da-hoon asserts that the path to truth requires digging deeper. Just as his finger brushes against Juyeon's forehead, Juyeon's eyes snap open. A surge of energy ripples through Juyeon's mind, shattering his memory, while chaos erupts in the mental sea as colossal fingers descend from the parted clouds above. Min Da-hoon's finger descends from the sky, heading straight for the turbulent, stormy sea. In the classroom where Juyeon once lied about going to the sea, another massive finger crashes through the ceiling, disrupting the room. At the facility where Juyeon underwent his final test, yet another finger appears, breaking through the structure. Controlling these immense fingers, Min Da-hoon demands the seed of Yggdrasil to reveal itself. With his fingers tearing through the ceilings and walls, Min Da-hoon intensifies his search for the seed of Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, the seed of Yggdrasil has captured a doctor and is mercilessly torturing him. The seed of Yggdrasil pierces one of the doctor's eyes, prompting a gut-wrenching scream of pain. Releasing the doctor, who collapses to his knees, the seed of Yggdrasil grins wickedly and remarks how much he's enjoying this chaos. Suddenly, something slams into the seed of Yggdrasil, forcing him to leap back, and he retaliates by stomping on Min Da-hoon's fingers. Back at the lab, Min Da-hoon winces in pain, but assures Min Seoa he's fine and instructs the team to continue. The researcher shouts into the walkie-talkie, ordering the machine team to initiate the operation and draw 10% of South Korea's power. Responding to the orders, the machine team channels the energy, which Min Da-hun struggles to contain as he directs it through his fingers. The seed of Yggdrasil muses aloud, questioning when human desires reach their peak and if they're ever truly satisfied. He wonders whether desires end with wealth, love, or success, or if they always continue to grow. Striding confidently, the seed of Yggdrasil approaches the large glass tube that had recently imprisoned him. Placing his hands against the tube, he murmurs cryptically about the true nature of human desires. Turning around with glowing, ominous eyes, the seed of Yggdrasil declares his intent to become a god using Juyun's body, an eternal god. Back in the lab, Min Da-hun channels another 10% of South Korea's power into the gun of truth and presses his electrified finger against Juyun's forehead. Holding his position, Min Da-hun mocks the seed of Yggdrasil, accusing him of being all talk and preying on the desires of others. The seed of Yggdrasil, clutching his wounded eye from the gun of truth, bursts into laughter and dismisses Min Da-hun's words as nonsense. However, his laughter halts as he spots Juyun walking toward him, glaring with anger and demanding that the seed of Yggdrasil leave his mind. Juyun appears furious, with no intention of tolerating the seed of Yggdrasil any longer. Min Da-hun's electrified finger descends once more, this time aimed directly at the seed of Yggdrasil. Like a magnet, the seed of Yggdrasil is forcibly pulled toward the finger. Finally, the seed of Yggdrasil is extracted from Juyun's head, appearing in the real world, where Min Da-hun captures it in his hand. Holding the seed of Yggdrasil close, Min Da-hun sternly tells it to listen carefully from now on. Observing the seed of Yggdrasil, the researcher notes its unusually small size and suggests it may have been tampered with. Min Da-hun agrees, suspecting someone had interfered with the seed of Yggdrasil's original form. Just then, Juyun awakens and anxiously asks if he has killed anyone. Rising slowly, he repeats the question, his voice filled with worry. Kneeling beside him, Min Da-hun reassures Juyun that most of the memories he saw were fabricated by the seed of Yggdrasil. Frustrated, Juyun asks what is real and what is a lie. Min Da-hun replies that only the people who implanted the seed of Yggdrasil in him can answer that question. The researcher urgently reminds Min Da-hun to hurry, warning that the power supply is nearly depleted. Min Da-hun considers their options, noting that the simplest solution is to destroy the seed of Yggdrasil entirely. However, he cautions that doing so could render Juyun brain-dead once again. Alternatively, Min Da-hun suggests Juyun could accept the seed of Yggdrasil and learn to control it. Presenting these choices, Min Da-hun asks Juyun to decide. To everyone's surprise, Juyun asks for the seed of Yggdrasil, stating that he wants it back. Reaching out his hand, Juyun asserts that since the seed of Yggdrasil came from his head, it belongs to him. Reluctantly, Min Da-hun hands the seed of Yggdrasil over, warning Juyun to handle it with care. Holding the seed of Yggdrasil, Juyun stares at it accusingly, blaming it for all the pain it has caused him. Turning to Min Da-hun, Juyun firmly asks how he can learn to control the seed of Yggdrasil. The seed of Yggdrasil are relics deeply tied to the creation of the world. Throughout human history, whenever a seed of Yggdrasil has sprouted, it has significantly altered the course of events. Those chosen by the seed of Yggdrasil become key holders, determining the future of the world. However, there exists a group that intercepted one of these seed of Yggdrasil and developed an entirely different approach. Their unique approach stems from their goal of replicating the seed of Yggdrasil instead of relying on its natural course. After extensive research, they managed to manipulate the seed of Yggdrasil, successfully altering and replicating it. They handpicked their own key holders, combining the transcendent power of the relic with advanced scientific technology to create Juyun. Now that Juyun is in Scallop's care, their top priority is to educate and protect him for the sake of humanity's future. Others within the organization are displeased with Min Da-hun's decision to keep Juyun alive, especially a sinister-looking woman. The next morning, Juyun notices someone in a peculiar suit kneeling and praying fervently to God. Taking a seat on the sofa, Juyun asks the stranger, slightly puzzled, who they are. The figure introduces herself as Chief Researcher Song Siami, claiming she will be responsible for Juyun's care. Hearing her refer to him as New Tube Man, Juyun asks what she means by that. Leaning closer, Song Siami explains that it's his nickname since he downloads no-tube videos to defeat villains. She then bombards Juyun with a barrage of questions, her excited chatter making him visibly nervous. Just then, footsteps echo in the room, and Min Da-hun enters, commenting on Song Siami's bizarre outfit. Song Siami begins to explain her attire, only for Min Da-hun to dismiss her as nuts. Offended by the insult, Song Siami tries to argue, but Min Da-hun interrupts, calling her a two-faced torturer. Proudly, Song Xiaomi retorts that she was the one who successfully reimplanted the seed of Yggdrasil in Juyun's head. She declares that she prefers to be called an arts scientist, emphasizing her expertise. She also reminds them that it was Juyun himself who asked to be taught how to control the seed of Yggdrasil. Juyun confirms this, stating he doesn't want to die just yet, as he still has many things left to do. Song Xiaomi suggests starting with how to turn the seed of Yggdrasil on and off, followed by learning how to nurture it properly. Min De-hun pulls a chip from his pocket, handing it to Juyun, and explains it contains information about those who tampered with his mind. Examining the chip, Juyun reads the label, Neo-Connecting. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the main doctor involved in Juyun's operation is giving a speech in a packed hall of reporters. A female reporter asks what his next move will be. Smiling, the doctor says he has been contemplating his next steps. He reveals that all his ideas lead to a single goal: creating a human beyond the limitations of ordinary humans. Gesturing to his legs, he states that these enhanced humans will have superior legs and increased lung capacity. He adds that their intelligence will surpass that of regular people. Finally, he declares his plan to create a superhuman, leaving the reporters in an uproar. Reporters rise from their seats, bombarding the doctor with questions about the project. One male reporter accuses the doctor of making an announcement without tangible results, but the doctor denies it. Wrapping up, the doctor thanks the reporters and exits the stage. As he descends the stairs, an associate informs him they have located the vessel, Juyun. Hearing this, the doctor flashes a sinister smile, expressing his delight. A month later, Song Xiaomi arrives outside Juyun's door, calling out to him and reminding him that school starts today. Inside, the room is a chaotic mess, littered with trash and empty snack packages. Startled by her call, Juyun snaps out of his daze, realizing he has been watching NoTube non-stop, accumulating 432 hours of watch time. Turning around, he complains about feeling dizzy, clearly overwhelmed by his binge. A chef carefully peels small, round fruits and skewers them onto a sharp stick, resembling a kebab. He dips the fruits into a sugary solution, coating them evenly for a glossy finish. He hands the stick to a bulky man, who asks Song Xiaomi if the fruits are truly delicious, and she affirms. The man takes a bite of one fruit, exclaiming in delight, truly enjoying its sweetness. After devouring the rest of the fruits, he comments that the experience was deeply satisfying. He then asks what these fruits would taste like to someone with two brains, leaving Song Xiaomi puzzled by the question. Meanwhile, Min De-hun stands in a meeting room, facing three large screens in a video call with three individuals. A bald man slams his fist on the desk, demanding to know if Min De-hun thinks he can hide Juyun forever. Min De-hun forces a smile, replying that he isn't actively trying to hide Juyun. Another man accuses Min De-hun of lying, pointing out that he used 10% of South Korea's power without prior approval. He asks if all that energy was used just to have a conversation. Min De-hun admits it was, explaining that it was crucial to uncover Juyun's past. The third man, intrigued, asks what exactly Min De-hun discovered. Min De-hun explains that the seed seems to have a peculiar attachment to Juyun. The man interrupts, stating that he dislikes vague answers, and displays Juyun's photo, asking if he's the one. Showing additional pictures, he dismisses Juyun as nothing special. Min De-hun urges the men to sense the potential that Juyun harbors. One of the men reminds Min De-hun that their organization doesn't invest in keyholder candidates below a certain threshold. He adds that elite special forces agents have already been dispatched to test Juyun's capabilities. The first man interrupts, announcing that the number of missing persons cases has been increasing recently. The others dismiss his claim, stating that disappearances happen all the time and aren't unusual. But the first man clarifies that only brain-dead patients are going missing, which raises concerns. This revelation catches Min De-hun's attention, and he begins to speculate. He wonders aloud if the disappearances could be connected to a group he is familiar with. At that moment, Song Xiaomi enters, informing Min De-hun that Juyun has already left for school. Juyun strolls down the streets, headphones on and a light backpack on his shoulders, feeling a sense of freedom. It's been a while since Juyun has become accustomed to the scene, with screens floating around the people he passes. However, something feels off, so he observes the surroundings more closely, fixing his gaze. After scanning the crowd, Juyun realizes that the screens are blank, showing no videos at all. Suddenly, three muscular men appear and surround Juyun from all sides. Juyun, surprised, asks if they need something from him. The men remain silent, and Ju-yun recalls Song Xianmi's warning about potential threats targeting him. He remembers her advice to embrace his powers and grow stronger, rather than avoiding them. Song Xianmi had stressed the importance of feeding the seed, filling its stomach, and asserting dominance over it as its master. She had also suggested Ju-yun prepare a convincing reason to use his powers when the time came. Reflecting on her words, Ju-yun wonders if being surrounded by these men is justification enough to act. Song Xianmi had described a scenario where Ju-yun could convince the seed of his desire to survive when faced with an attack. Remembering her training, Ju-yun decides to initiate symbiosis with the seed. Closing his eyes, he finds himself standing before dozens of floating screens, one of which asks if he wants to like. Ju-yun stands firm, remaining silent as he stares at the three men surrounding him. These men are members of a special task force, a highly trained unit tasked with the most dangerous missions for the government. Among them is the Horn Unit, a specialized team chosen for their unmatched combat skills, focused on anti-superhuman operations. To the Horn Unit, taking down a high school student would be a simple and effortless mission. They might feel embarrassed by the easy task, yet one still kicks the sharp fruit kebab stick at Ju-yun. Min Seoa steps in front of Ju-yun, effortlessly catching the sharp stick midair. She turns to Ju-yun and tells him to see how well the training he's undergone will hold up in real combat. Earlier, Min Seoa and Xianmi had discussed Ju-yun's progress, noting how easily he could follow NoTube's videos. Min Seoa pointed out that the real challenge wasn't just following the videos, but understanding how and to what extent Ju-yun could apply them. Xianmi gave a thumbs up, agreeing with Min Seoa's assessment, and added that Ju-yun had limitless potential in how he could adapt to the videos. The very thought of it had excited her immensely. Back in the present, Ju-yun is bent down, positioning himself with hands on the ground, resembling a marathon start. The Horn Unit sneers, mocking Ju-yun, wondering if he's trying to escape. Like a bullet, Ju-yun propels himself forward, his feet crashing hard into one of the men's faces. The force of the hit is so immense that the man's teeth are shattered and sent flying. The man is sent flying backwards, crashing into the ground several feet away. The other two men look on in disbelief, completely stunned by Ju-yun's speed and strength. Glancing at the men, Ju-yun calmly says not to blame him, as they attacked first. The bald man charges at Ju-yun from behind, hoping to catch him off guard. But Ju-yun is too fast, spinning around to land a powerful kick right into the bald man's face. The force of the kick causes the bald man's head to twist unnaturally, and he groans in pain. His cheek slams inside his mouth, and he curses Ju-yun in a fit of rage. Ju-yun raises his leg high, adopting the stance of a Jeet Kune Do master. The bald man clenches his fists in anger, throwing punches at Ju-yun, but Ju-yun blocks some and dodges others. As he continues attacking, the bald man mocks Ju-yun, questioning if all he knows how to do is dodge. Clenching his fist, Ju-yun thrusts it forward and lands a powerful blow on the bald man's backside. The punch knocks the wind out of the bald man, and he stumbles, struggling to catch his breath. Saliva drools from his mouth as he realizes that Ju-yun is skilled in boxing. Ju-yun finishes the fight with a precise uppercut that sends the bald man flying through the air. The bald man crashes to the ground with a loud thud, knocked unconscious. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Ju-yun turns to the fallen man and apologizes, explaining that he's in a hurry to get to school. Witnessing all of this, the last remaining man feels his body freeze with fear, despite his own extensive training and strength. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, the man pulls out a sharp knife, determined to prove that he won't lose to a high school student. He charges at Ju-yun, thrusting the knife toward him, but Ju-yun effortlessly sidesteps the attack. Despite his speed, Ju-yun feels a slight sting as the knife grazes his cheek, leaving a small cut. Ju-yun steps back, wiping the blood from his cheek, and notes that things have reached a point where he no longer cares about the consequences. His eyes glow with intensity as he declares that anyone who tries to mess with him from now on won't get away unscathed. With newfound resolve, Ju-yun charges at the man, raising his hand to strike. Gathering all his strength, Ju-yun delivers a resounding slap to the man's face, distorting his features. This moment plays out exactly as Xiaomi had planned, a series of steps culminating in the slap that seals the fight. Ju-yun looks down at the three defeated men, now lying motionless on the ground. Sliding his foot across the ground, Ju-yun strikes a celebratory pose, as if he had just won a gold medal. Witnessing the battle, a bulky man snacking on a fruit kebab calls Ju-yun a defective product. Standing across the road, the man glares at Ju-yun, his eyes narrowing, while Ju-yun celebrates his victory. Through gritted teeth, The man mutters, calling Ju-yeon a defective product, then quickly writes a report with his name and location. As Ju-yeon and Min Seo walk away, unaware of the man, he mocks Ju-yeon's ability as a cheap copy. Back at school, Yoon Jisoo freezes, her hands covering her mouth as her eyes widen upon seeing Ju-yeon after so long. Leaning in closer, she demands to know why he's been gone for so long and what on earth he's been doing all this time instead. Her gaze shifts to his bulging veins, and with a mix of curiosity and excitement, she eagerly asks if he's been working out non-stop. The other students in the class turn to look at Ju-yeon, their faces filled with confusion as they struggle to recognize him. Min Seo sternly warns Ju-yeon not to cause any unnecessary fuss and to ensure he reports everything in detail. Shaking his head, Ju-yeon snaps back, promising her that he will report as instructed. Watching their interaction, Yoon Jisoo's expression darkens, a hint of jealousy crossing her face as she wonders about their relationship. Her thoughts spiral further as she starts to suspect that Ju-yeon and Min Seo might be secretly meeting outside of school. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon steps into an empty classroom and begins to report the incident where he fought the strange men to Min Da-hun and Song Seonmi. Seonmi curiously asks Ju-yeon how it feels to be back at school after being away for so long. Ju-yeon hesitates, then responds with newfound confidence, saying it feels like a fresh start. As Ju-yeon speaks, Min Seo is standing by the door, her eyes scanning the hallway for any students. Seonmi warns Ju-yeon not to act recklessly, while Min Da-hun firmly reminds him to visit the teacher's office for pending issues. Moments later, Ju-yeon makes his way to the teacher's office, only to hear something that leaves him utterly speechless. The teacher informs Ju-yeon that he is now a recipient of support from a prestigious scholarship foundation. Despite his average grades, he explains that the foundation believes in Ju-yeon's talent and will support him in any future endeavors. Adding to the surprise, the teacher reveals that the foundation's representative made a specific request regarding Ju-yeon. Handing Ju-yeon his life record, the teacher calmly tells him he has the freedom to make any changes he deems necessary. Ju-yeon's expression hardens as he takes the report, his hand gripping the pen tightly as he begins scribbling something onto the paper. Once finished, Ju-yeon rises from his seat, bows respectfully to the teacher, and then walks out of the office. The teacher picks up the form, examining it closely, and notices that Ju-yeon erased deceased from the parents' column and replaced it with the word searching. Back at headquarters, Seonmi curiously asks Min Da-hun why he suddenly decided to send Ju-yeon back to school. Min Da-hun pauses, as he explains that it's only natural for Ju-yeon to return to school and experience normalcy. He elaborates that no matter how unique or different someone may be, deep down, they are still students with the same rights as anyone else. He emphasizes allowing Ju-yeon to enjoy the school experience, as he expressed a desire for a normal life. Seonmi smirks, pointing out that Min Da-hun has a knack for finding unusual people and encouraging them to pursue normal dreams. At the Neo-Connecting Organization's office, the doctor sits alone in his dimly lit office, poring over digital documents. Holding a pencil, he jots down notes furiously, his focus unwavering as he schemes through the extensive data in front of him. His movements halt as his eyes widen in shock at the sight of a report labeling Ju-yeon as a defective product. Rising abruptly, he grabs his phone and dials the spy, coldly asking if Ju-yeon has been located. The spy, who had reported on Ju-yeon earlier that morning, confirms and adds that Ju-yeon is currently in contact with Scallops. When the doctor asks if he can handle the situation alone, the spy grits his teeth and vows to settle the matter, calling Ju-yeon an ungrateful monkey in a venomous tone. The doctor enters a massive lab with rows of human pods, each connected to wires, creating a sinister, mad scientist vibe. The pods are filled with unconscious humans, their lifeless faces suspended in an eerie stillness. Wires connect the humans inside the pods, while screens on the front of each pod play sniper training videos. On a nearby table lies the seed of Yggdrasil, attached to a chip and carefully held by two robotic arms. Another robotic arm equipped with a drill creates a precise hole in one of the men's temples. The robotic arms then push the seed of Yggdrasil directly into the man's brain, completing the procedure. Suddenly, the man's eyes snap open, bloodshot and pulsating with bulging veins, as alarms sound throughout the lab. Watching the chaotic scene unfold on a screen, the doctor smirks and mutters that there isn't much left to accomplish now. Shortly after, the system announces success as all the test subjects fully integrate with the seed of Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon is training hard, performing push-ups, his body glistening with sweat as he reaches his 98th repetition. At that moment, Min Seo arrives and informs him that they've received a mission from headquarters. Ju-yeon keeps doing push-ups as Min Seo casually sits on his back, increasing the strain on his arms. Scrolling through her phone, Min Seoa explains that Scallop's radar has detected a nationwide issue involving missing brain-dead patients. Summoning all his strength, Ju-yeon completes his 100th push-up, causing Min Seoa to leap off him in surprise. As Ju-yeon collapses onto the ground, Min Seoa tells him that their mission is to investigate the disappearance of these patients. Panting heavily, Ju-yeon hesitantly asks if the mission is likely to be dangerous. Tossing a towel onto his face, Min Seoa reassures him that it won't be anything too risky. She then holds her phone up to Ju-yeon's face and asks if he recognizes the person in the picture. Glancing at the photo, Ju-yeon identifies the man as the doctor and CEO of Neo Connecting. Min Seoa explains that Min Da-hoon suspects the missing patients are linked to Neo Connecting and they need to dig deeper. Suddenly, Yoon Ji-soo arrives on the rooftop and curiously asks what the two of them are doing. She looks at them with a grin, assuming they're exercising together. Ignoring Yoon Ji-soo entirely, Min Seoa turns to Ju-yeon and says they'll start their mission as soon as school is over. Turning back, Min Seoa sarcastically asks Yoon Ji-soo why she always follows them around like a lost puppy. Without waiting for a response, Min Seoa walks past her and disappears down the stairs. Yoon Ji-soo approaches Ju-yeon and asks if he can help her with something. With a mischievous grin, Yoon Ji-soo reveals she's trying to film the trending superconductor dance and wonders if Ju-yeon knows it. Agreeing to help, Ju-yeon grabs her phone and starts filming while Yoon Ji-soo enthusiastically performs the dance steps. At an excavation site, the captain watches a new worker struggle and grumbles that if Ju-yeon were here, the job would already be done. Out of nowhere, a hand grabs the captain's shoulder, startling him. The captain spins around to see a large man standing behind him with a menacing expression. Wrapping an arm around the captain, the man cryptically asks if he knows what happens when someone loses their sight. Without giving him a chance to answer, the man explains in a chilling tone how the body deteriorates over time. Confused and alarmed, the captain demands to know who the man is. Removing his glasses, the man reveals glowing, unnatural eyes and coldly instructs the captain to summon Ju-yeon. Later that afternoon, Yoon Ji-soo excitedly exclaims that her most recent dance video is racking up views. She walks alongside Ju-yeon and Min Seoa on the sidewalk, chatting happily. Ju-yeon's phone suddenly rings, and he sees it's a call from the captain, whom he hasn't heard from in a long time. Stopping abruptly, Ju-yeon looks worried, prompting the girls to ask what's wrong. Tossing his bag aside, Ju-yeon shouts that the captain is in danger and sprints away. Min Seoa chases after him, shouting that they don't have time to get sidetracked. Ju-yeon quickly shows her a photo on his phone of the captain beaten and lying on the ground. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Min Seoa curses under her breath and runs faster. Watching them disappear into the distance, Yoon Ji-soo waves awkwardly, feeling left out as usual. Arriving at the site, Ju-yeon and Min Seoa scan the area while catching their breath. Ju-yeon spots the captain lying unconscious a few feet away and immediately runs toward him. Min Seoa tries to stop him, but Ju-yeon lunges forward without hesitation. Out of nowhere, a large excavator speeds toward the captain, its claw poised to crush him. Acting quickly, Ju-yeon uses all his strength to drag the captain out of harm's way. As the dust settles, the spy steps out of the shadows, his massive frame towering over them. Ju-yeon demands to know who he is, but the man cryptically responds that Ju-yeon should already recognize him. The spy exudes a deadly aura, taunting Ju-yeon by saying he would know him if his eyes were gone. A wave of familiarity washes over Ju-yeon as he realizes the man is from the lab experiments. Turning his back to Ju-yeon, the man thanks him, claiming he replaced his eyes because of him. Raising his fist, the man releases a powerful shockwave that flips the excavator onto its side. Witnessing the display of raw power, Ju-yeon and Min Seoa quickly understand he's no ordinary opponent. Shaking his hand loose, the man declares that he will now take Ju-yeon's eyes and the seed of Yggdrasil implanted in his brain. Ju-yeon watches in silence as the man, engulfed in a deadly aura, remains unwavering in his stance. Seeing the grin on the man's face, Ju-yeon clenches his fist, feeling utterly sick of the situation. A surge of rage overtakes him as he thinks about being pursued like a lab dog despite having done nothing to harm anyone. Gritting his teeth, he tells the man that he won't sit still anymore, prompting the man's grin to grow even wider. Maintaining his composure, Ju-yeon asks what he did wrong in the first place. Removing his glasses to reveal dark, piercing eyes, the man coldly declares that defective products like Ju-yeon need to be retrieved. Fed up with the talking, Ju-yeon dashes forward and delivers a powerful kick straight straight to the man's head. Using the techniques he learned during training, Ju-yun follows up with a mid-air spin and lands another kick with his opposite leg. The man absorbs the full force of the kick and is pushed backward slightly. Ju-yun is startled to see the man maintain his footing and stand upright, completely unharmed by both kicks. Like an X-ray machine, the man scans Ju-yun, observing his internal organs and the seat of Yggdrasil within him as if through clear glass. Realizing the danger, Min Seoa shouts out a warning to Ju-yun about the man's eyes. Without warning, the man thrusts a fist forward, landing a devastating blow on Ju-yun's face. Following up immediately, he punches Ju-yun in the stomach with his other hand, lifting him off the ground. Grabbing Ju-yun's hair like claws, the man unleashes a flurry of powerful punches directly at him. Ju-yun, now battered, has his arms visibly damaged from trying to block the onslaught of blows. Not yet satisfied, the man raises his fist again, slamming Ju-yun with a strike that sends him flying backward. Like a stone being thrown, Ju-yun bounces off the ground and crashes with a loud thud, leaving an impact crater. Seeing Ju-yun on the brink of defeat, Min Seoa watches anxiously. The man strides toward Ju-yun, raising his hand before lowering it to grab him once more. Sitting dazed on the ground, Ju-yun groans in pain as smoke and dust swirl around him. Suddenly, Ju-yun lunges upward, aiming a kick at the man, who dodges it with ease. Locking his hands around Ju-yun, the man forcefully slams him into the ground with immense power. Smirking as he towers over Ju-yun, the man curses him and declares he's going to die. Blood drips from Ju-yun's mouth as he lies on the ground, struggling to get up. The man grabs a fistful of sand and pours it onto Ju-yun's eyes, making him cry out in agony. Feeling his eyes burning, Ju-yun begins cursing loudly and groaning in pain. Towering over the writhing Ju-yun, the man mocks him, telling him to feel the emotions he used to suppress. The man reminds Ju-yun that once upon a time, he cared for him deeply. Back in the lab, Ju-yun had first met the man and asked for help with an injured ankle. Tears in his eyes, Ju-yun had explained how he hurt himself while running. Acting like a caring brother, the man had taught Ju-yun how to run safely and avoid falling. He had advised Ju-yun not to run aimlessly and instead focus on his path, and Ju-yun had thanked him. When the synchronization process between Ju-yun and the seat of Yggdrasil began, the man had watched with visible worry. But after seeing the process succeed, the man hugged Ju-yun in relief before Ju-yun collapsed from exhaustion. However, when the seat of Yggdrasil took over Ju-yun's body, it attacked the man and destroyed his right eye. The man became blind as a result, left to suffer the consequences of that attack. Now, in the present, his eyes have been replaced with mechanical ones that allow him to see far beyond human limits. As the dust clears, Ju-yun is kneeling while the man declares that the world is collapsing and needs to be rebuilt. Suddenly, Min Seoa charges from behind, attempting to strike the man. However, the man reacts swiftly and knocks Min Seoa back with a precise strike from his elbow. Min Seoa's eyes widen in shock as she stumbles backward, her arms trembling from the impact. Feeling her arms damaged, Min Seoa winces and realizes the man's strength is overwhelming. The man tells Ju-yun he succeeded as an experiment because he lacked the strong ego that ruined others. He mocks Ju-yun, recalling how he tried to appease the researchers even when they poked around in his brain. As the man continues mocking him, he fails to notice the excavator's shovel descending rapidly from above. At the last moment, the man looks up just as the shovel crashes down on him, causing an explosive burst of debris. A minute earlier, a woman climbs onto the excavator and, taking a wild guess, begins pressing random buttons. Fortunately, she manages to start the machine and begins figuring out how to operate it. In a matter of seconds, she learns how to maneuver the excavator's shovel and move its arm up and down. After quickly mastering the controls, Seonmi drives the excavator toward the man and strikes him from behind with the shovel. The sheer force of the blow sends the man flying backward, and he crashes to the ground several feet away with a loud swoosh. Witnessing the excavator suddenly spring into action and attack the villain, the people nearby are left stunned. Seonmi pivots the excavator around and drives it directly toward the remaining men, who scramble and run for their lives. Just as the excavator abruptly halts, the fleeing men stop as well, letting out audible sighs of relief. Ju-yun watches intently, wondering who is controlling the machine, as Seonmi steps out and boldly demands to know who dares to trouble him. Recognizing her, Ju-yun breaks into an excited smile, his face lighting up. As Seonmi approaches, Ju-yun bows his head and apologizes sincerely for acting recklessly on his own. Raising her hand as though to slap him, Seonmi surprises Ju-yun by gently stroking his cheek, offering comfort instead of anger. The spot where the man had crashed is now shrouded in a thick cloud of dust rising ominously toward the sky. Clutching her injured arm, Min Seo explains that the villain is like a cyborg with strange eyes that allow him to see behind him. Xianmi dismisses this, suggesting the man is using nearby CCTV cameras to enhance his vision rather than seeing backward. She then mentions she has already destroyed most of the surveillance cameras in the vicinity. Pointing out the danger of staying, she advises they retreat to the base to regroup and come up with a new plan. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts nearby, shaking the entire area and sending another plume of smoke into the air. Juyeon and the two girls stare in shock as the smoke begins to clear, revealing the shadowy outline of the man. Stepping fully into view, his glowing eyes pierce through the dust, his slightly damaged cyborg body radiating anger. Horrified by the sight, Xiaomi mutters that she has no particular interest in cyborgs. Realizing the imminent danger, Juyeon shouts a desperate warning for Xiaomi to run just as the cyborg charges forward at blinding speed. Like swatting at a fly, the cyborg grabs Xiaomi by the throat and hoists her off the ground with ease. Struggling in his grip, Xiaomi desperately tries to pry his hand away from her neck but finds it impossible. Tightening his grip, the cyborg cruelly refers to her as an unexpected catch, his voice dripping with malice. Despite her dire situation, Xiaomi smirks and pulls out a round device, tossing it near the cyborg's feet. The device releases countless electric strands that surge around the cyborg, shocking him and causing him to groan in pain. However, his groans quickly turn to mocking laughter as he declares that the electric charge barely tickles him. Before Xiaomi can react, he punches her with his free hand, only for Min Seoa to lunge at him from behind and kick him in the face. The cyborg retaliates instantly, extending his arm and grabbing Min Seoa by the neck, locking her in his grasp. With both girls in his clutches, he slams their heads together with a sickening laugh. The brutal collision leaves both Xiaomi and Min Seoa dazed, their mouths bleeding and their eyes closing as they nearly pass out. The cyborg roars with laughter. Witnessing this brutality, something deep inside Juyeon snaps as a flood of familiar helplessness washes over him. His mind flashes back to the day of the car accident when his mother was trapped inside and told him to run away. A stranger had pulled him to safety just as the car exploded before his eyes, killing his mother instantly. Haunted by that day, Juyeon has carried the weight of guilt, unable to forgive himself. Isolated and friendless, he has spent years struggling to escape the shadow of his past. Even after gaining powers, all Juyeon ever wanted was to lead a normal life like everyone else, but his fear of failure has always held him back, leaving him powerless in critical moments. This overwhelming guilt and helplessness threaten to consume him completely, his mind spiraling into darkness. He finds himself wishing he had stayed in his room, escaping reality by watching no-tube videos. Just then, a motivational video appears on a screen, its message confronting the excuses people make as they waste their lives away. Xiaomi collapses to the ground, lying sideways and passes out. Meanwhile, Min Seoa, badly injured, struggles to stay conscious, unable to feel her face. Spotting her movement, the cyborg smirks and delivers a powerful kick, calling it his finishing move and sending her flying. Min Seoa crashes to the ground a few feet away, just as Juyeon rushes toward the cyborg to confront him. Turning to face Juyeon, the cyborg coldly remarks that it's best to kill a raised dog quickly and painlessly. Juyeon stands firm but feels overwhelmed, labeling himself useless and no match for the cyborg's strength. Tears welling up, Juyeon's face contorts as hopelessness makes him want to give up. Suddenly, the motivational speaker's voice echoes in Juyeon's mind, questioning if his doubts are his real obstacle. In his mind's eye, the scene shifts to a vast, snow-covered mountain range with icy winds howling. Juyeon finds himself standing before the speaker, who stares at him and asks if he is struggling. Shivering from the cold, Juyeon admits that fighting the cyborg feels like an impossible battle. The speaker asks if Juyeon is stuck in the past, unable to move forward and take action. Reluctantly, Juyeon agrees, only to be met with the speaker calling him a liar. Leaning closer, the speaker accuses Juyeon of making excuses and avoiding responsibility. Frustrated, Juyeon shouts, asking the speaker what he should do. Turning around, the speaker replies that even he doesn't know the answer. Juyeon cries out, questioning why he alone must carry such a heavy burden and endure so much pain. The speaker calmly explains that Juyeon was chosen, not as a coward but as a hero to save no-tube. Confused, Juyeon asks why he was chosen and what makes him different from anyone else. Smiling, the speaker says it's because Juyeon genuinely cared for no-tube videos. Hearing this, Ju-yeon is flooded with memories of himself scrolling through countless NoTube videos. Whether at breakfast, while sleeping, or even while changing clothes, NoTube was always part of his daily life. He recalls spending an entire month watching NoTube without stopping, as the speaker calls him a hero for the platform. The speaker urges Ju-yeon to trust himself, accept the truth, and take action. Snapping back to reality, Ju-yeon finds himself standing before the cyborg, now filled with determination. Being called a hero shifts Ju-yeon's mentality, and he now stands unshaken and fearless. The cyborg raises his fists to strike, but Ju-yeon braces himself for the attack, prepared to counter. As the cyborg thrusts his fist forward, Ju-yeon unexpectedly thanks him, catching the cyborg off guard. The cyborg unleashes a barrage of punches, which Ju-yeon skillfully dodges, prompting the cyborg to demand why he's being thanked. Leaping high into the air, Ju-yeon performs a backflip, landing several paces away to maintain distance. Smiling confidently, Ju-yeon says the cyborg gave him the motivation he needed and gestures mockingly for him to attack. Enraged, the cyborg charges at Ju-yeon, vowing to tear him apart piece by piece. Focusing intently, Ju-yeon locks his gaze on the approaching cyborg, declaring he knows how to defeat him. Raising two fingers, Ju-yeon thrusts them forward, piercing directly into the cyborg's eyes, his weak point. Screaming in pain as his vision is destroyed, the cyborg collapses to his knees, clutching his face. Wasting no time, Ju-yeon sprints toward a nearby excavator, formulating a plan to finish the fight. The captain realizes Ju-yeon's intentions and cheers him on, urging him to continue. With a powerful leap, Ju-yeon enters the excavator, ready to demolish the cyborg completely. Swinging the excavator's shovel with force, Ju-yeon smashes the cyborg's body into countless shattered pieces. As the smoke clears, the cyborg's severed head lies amidst the rubble, his body destroyed. Not satisfied, Ju-yeon crushes the remaining parts of the cyborg into utter nothingness, leaving no trace behind. Witnessing their victory, the captain and the others cheer loudly, celebrating their hard-fought triumph.